Okay. Good afternoon, and we are back with documentary films. And today's topic will be to discuss some of the technicalities of documentary films, referring some of the filmmakers and their techniques, and how those techniques were really groundbreaking and their contribution to that film platform and the new devices that they planned, that they executed, and those are brilliantly accepted globally. So, this brief class will necessarily talk a handful of legendary, famous film thinkers, film directors. Uh, of course, one of them is Peter Watkins. Peter Watkins, who established his reputation making docu dramas, actually. And in that sense, two docu dramas are mentioned when we talk about Peter Watkins, and one is uh, Kaloden, and the another one is the War Game. Now, Kaloden and the War Game, these two docu dramas in the 1960s, they really created sensation only because the novelty of thought on the part of Peter Watkins as a film thinker and the kind of newness in making films that we found in the contribution of Peter Watkins. Now, in the this kind of documentaries that came through Peter Watkins that talked a lot about reconstruction and how actors were actually placed to make those documentaries to give a different sort of taste and flavor. Now, what we actually found in those documentaries is that the process of asking questions, the questionnaire, the kind of conversation that is very much very there. And, Watkins actually did a bit different. He reflected deeper and talked about more on a particular term that we know today as monoform. So the monoform is that newness that came through Peter Watkins, and the so-called conventional, questionnaire pattern that is very much in practice in case of Peter Watkins. We find that he wanted to make it a bit different. Now, the kind of docu drama style that Peter Watkins is actually known, in him we found a boldness and the necessary collage, form of collage, and that was so vivid that the documentaries, the docu dramas actually were very, very well accepted. And also in the docudramas of Peter Watkins, we found voice over narration, a sort of technique that was very successful while making films in case of Peter Watkins. And not only that, in case of camera, handheld camera, so this kind of a camera and the camera work also became more vibrant in case of Peter Watkins. So these are not only, but we find some other uses of amateur actors in the docudramas of Peter Watkins, and we found how through camera there was a kind of a blurred line. So it was such a kind of a blurring effect that made the kind of sensation of because it was difficult to make the differentiation between fact and fiction. So he could make this kind of effect, this kind of an effect that could make the whole docudrama a different one. And so this very pseudo documentary film, the term is often connected to Peter Watkins. So it was very critical, and it was It talked a lot about the past, the present, and of course of the near future. It talked a lot about the political issues, and he could make the he could make the viewers think intellectually more than giving a direct, to the point answer or explanation. So in Watkins, we find this very noticeable changes, noticeable contributions, which were very uncommon earlier, and that made a different sort of landmark on the part of Watkins. And we know that in some cases, the docudramas often known as mockumentaries. Okay, those are mockumentaries, which are also very, very famous when we talk of the docudramas of Watkins. Next to Watkins, another thinker, another practitioner of this particular genre, the name which has to be mentioned here is no other than Nick Broomfield. Now, Nick Broomfield is a very significant name in case of making documentary films, because there we find a kind of a development of a participatory and performative mode. Okay, so it's again a new approach. It's again a new kind of flavor that we find in the case of Nick Broomfield. The participatory and the performative mode made it different, and in Broomfield we find that kind of a documentarist who is basically investigative in nature. So nowadays we find the kind of documentaries made. And of course, I would like to mention here the documentaries often I personally love very much is that I watch on the Epic channel. In Epic channel, you can find some brilliant documentaries that talk about Indian food, Indian flavor, Indian mythology. So in one of the documentaries that I watched recently, I found how the kind of food culture was described, delineated through visiting so many places, and the persons who still they do practice the kind of food habit, and how the Mughal connection was very much uh, compatible with the Murshidabad connection, and how that Hajarduari had that kind of a tradition of, they made a different sort of biryani that I came to know through this Epic channel. And the kind of biryani that they were referring to was fish biryani. And in that documentary available on Epic channel, I do remember that they were actually baking the fish while making fish biryani, and that fish baking process was so delicate. Only a real performer can do this one, and it was a delicate process. And while baking the fish, and before the processes were on, all those it should be well prepared, and so that nothing can disturb while having the fish, and processing it through biryani. So this biryani that came through Mughal tradition, we know only chicken and mutton and such kind of red meats were basically connected to biryani. But this fish biryani was a different flavor, and that came in this Murshidabad gharana. And at the same time, I was amazed knowing that how Dhakai parota, a big size fluffy paratha, and this paratha is was very, very tasty, and it was really a kind of different sort of experience that people enjoyed so long, and that old gharana was continued so long, and probably even today that can be found over there, because those who know the tradition very well, they only can think of this Dhakai Paratha, and that is gradually can be found or practiced or prepared by different corners of West Bengal. Now, these documentaries, they often go and visit to the place. They ask the performers and those who prepare the food, though they are interviewed, and through interview and recollection that we are talking about. So it's a performative mode at the same time participatory, and this is a kind of a performance and participation at the same time. So Broomfield is basically making documentaries that was investigative in nature. So you go just like a detective, and just like a detective, the documentary maker, documentarist goes, questions, interrogates, investigates, and through investigation, new things come up. So this is something. These are really in practice nowadays. So Nick Broomfield is that one of the pioneers of making investigative documentaries, because it's a distinct, a very different sort of interviewing process technique, and where at the time of making interviews, the real view, the real flavor, the real experiences being there in that particular place, and how do they really feel, those were all documented, and those were all documented so perfectly. And I would like to mention here one of the particular term that is connected to Nick Broomfield, because he in his own opinion, he described film as like a roller coaster ride. Okay, film is like a roller coaster ride, and they are like a diary into the future. So film is nothing that a kind of a passage, a kind of a platform that can help, that can enrich us, that can encourage us, that can motivate us to go further. We can think differently. We can go to the future world, having a new horizon, reaching a new path, reaching a new destination. At the same time, we are also very much encouraged in that way. Another film thinker and performer who is to be mentioned right at this moment is Kim Longinotto. Now, Kim Longinotto, of course, took a different path. Kim Longinotto had a few novelty in techniques. I think I should start talking about Kim Longinotto with a quote in which Longinotto was saying that I don't think of films as documents or records of things. I try to make them as like the experience of watching a fiction film as possible, though of course nothing is ever set up. So nothing is set up, rather it is something, natural. That natural flavor should be there, and it should not be, artificial environment should be created over there. So keeping those artificialities away, such kind of film, such kind of documentation, it should be very vibrant, very natural, that one can watch, one can enjoy, one can get, enlightened. But it should be very, very natural. It should be very real. That sense of reality is very much there. While talking about Kim Longinotto, we need to think of how she was trying to figure out the characters and the audience, and in her own word, if I quote Longinotto once again, you can make this jump into someone else's experience while making documentaries, while making films. It is something that one is jumping into another's experiences. So we get into, we learn that we should not, or that we actually never had before. But this jumping into someone else's experience is really different. It is something that we could hardly have access to earlier, but it is through film is giving us that kind of a particular opportunity to get into, to get involved into someone else's experiences. So in that way, Kim Longinotto is unique. In that way, Kim Longinotto is talking about real experiences, and those experiences that is hitherto unknown to us. Longinotto's technique is novel in the sense that, being invisible, the documentarist, that there is very little voiceover. So voiceover, that particular technique, and Longinotto is not prescribing to make it artificial more and more, rather a very little use of voiceover. Interviews are taken formally, and there may be incidental music in the background, some very limited amount of captions may be there, but when the audience looks at, as Longinotto used to think of, that she never wanted to impose on extra and those added, or that superlative technicalities, so that the whole process shouldn't seem to us very, very artificial. It should be natural, it should be neutral, it should be very, very in that sense different short of. So she was talking about that no zooming even, and we shouldn't even think of that zooming process should be applied more and more, and it should not give any specific conclusion. This is another very significant aspect connected to the films of Longinotto. She used to think of, at the end of the documentary, we are not going to say any specific conclusion, rather, we are going to raise question. Just an open-ended film, just an open-ended novel. The films of Longinotto talks more about raising questions and brainstorming a sense in the mind that the audience can think more of their own. They can, visualize, or they should individually come to their own conclusion. They should have their own kind of interpretation that Longinotto was talking about. And the another one we put at this particular film thinker, Michael Moore. And Michael Moore is, of course, wanted to add something. And Michael Moore had, in his own kind of observations, and according to Michael Moore, it should be more and more visible. Visibility will be there, and in the documentaries, that sense of, visible presence, that should always be there. And just like Broomfield, Michael Moore was also of the same kind of opinion that documentary should be at the same time participatory and performative. It is, of course, a kind of a performance, and this kind of documentaries that can give a kind of a vibrant presence, and it is something on the part of the documentaries. It's a kind of a commitment, such kind of a commitment that can give that essence, the real essence of life and charm. And Michael Moore's documentaries are often called agitprop documentaries, and often polemical in nature, But at the same time, the documentaries of Michael Moore that talked a lot about a very clear viewpoint without creating any unnecessary doubt on the part of the thinkers. So this kind of documentaries had a different sort of acceptance in the mind of audience. He was talking more about quote unquote a sort of a balance. There must be a balance on the part of the documentarist, balance in the sense that it should not be too artificial. At the same time, some application must be there. So there will be a perfect balance, nothing too more, nothing too less, and at the same time, so that it can go hand in hand with the mainstream media. That was also in the mind of Michael Moore. So Michael Moore, in his documentaries, applied a sort of a humor, and we also know that the application of lampoon is very much there in the documentaries. And because of such kind of application of humor, with application of lampoon, application of some engaging discussion, involvement on the part of the documentarist, so all those faculties made the documentaries very entertaining. So this entertaining part of documentaries that we find in the case of Michael Moore, this is very significant. This is very necessary, and that has to be mentioned. So in this brief talk, we refer to this Peter Watkins, we refer to Nick Broomfield, we refer to Kim Longinotto, and Michael Moore. And we have to mention that so many other documentary makers are there. They are the really some of the great researchers, they are the thinkers, they are the practitioners, and they used to try how to make films, documentaries, improve that can get improved day by day and can give a different sort of flavor on the part of them, and so that the audience can also enjoy, they can also get informed. Documentaries are basically full of information, but at the same time, when it is information with entertainment, it can make the whole process more enjoyable, it can make the whole condition more thought provoking. Thank you so much.